Hello and welcome to my Legends and Legacy show. I am Breda McCaig. I have always been fascinated by inspirational people around the world, and now I am able to bring them directly to you. So listen, learn and get inspired. Hello and welcome to my latest episode of the Legends and Legacy show. Today I have a gem of a gentleman to share with you. Michael Levin is talking to me. He is in California. I am in Ireland, and we are going to be discussing intrapreneurship, entrepreneurship and leadership. Michael, you're very welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Breda. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And Michael and I met on a Women in Finance summit that we did, where we were talking about diversity and leadership. And we caught up afterwards because I thought Michael was so interesting to listen to. And we decided to do an interview together to try and share our expertise and our knowledge with every one of you around the entrepreneurship topic, intrapreneurs, what they are, innovation at grassroots, and leadership. So, Michael, tell us a bit about yourself.
Breda, I've always been an entrepreneur. Going back to my childhood, over the years, I've started businesses in countless industries, been fortunate enough that 4 of them have become multi-million-dollar entities. Prior to that, I had a corporate career with Pepsi, ran divisions for them, and over the past 15 years, I've had the pleasure of sharing what I know in keynotes and workshops around entrepreneurial leadership.
Yeah, brilliant. And my background, for those of you who don't know me, is 20 years in corporates, most of them financial institutions, most of them working across the globe, but based in Ireland and the UK. So lots of corporate experience between the two of us. And then I've ended up running Lean in Ireland, which is a diversity program to try and help women achieve their ambitions in Ireland. It's Sheryl Sandberg's program. I run the Irish bit of it, or some of it, with some fabulous women. And then I've ended up doing motivational talks because I am mad into emotional intelligence and love that it is so intertwined with everything in the business world. So we're doing this to make sure that we try and capture and share our expertise and see if there's any takeaways for any of you listening that can help you going forward. So Michael, we're going to talk today about the entrepreneurship piece. And I know you're very passionate about that. So do you want to take us into that?
Sure. Breda, what I believe is within organizations, I've trademarked creating an entrepreneurial workplace because I want to see people take ownership for their position, that they take ownership for those they impact both internally and externally. And I want those closest to a situation to be actively involved in any innovations, in any initiatives, as well as solving problems and challenges. And I believe when you get an entire organization involved, it's so much top-down.
Yeah. And so for me, I have probably personal experience of that, where I've been in corporates and I am the typical intrapreneur. And you know what? That isn't even a word I knew many years ago. I just was probably thinking like an entrepreneur, but I was in a corporate. And it took I had 2 fabulous mentors around me at the time to sort of see that the intrapreneur was trying to get out and trying to activate around the corporates and to encourage me and mentor me and I suppose nurture that innovation that they've seen. Would you say you've seen a lot of that as well?
I think something that you discussed earlier with me, Breda, offline was most leaders aren't comfortable doing it. You've had some great leaders. The vast majority prefer a traditional autocratic top-down company because if you're embracing and driving entrepreneurship, you have to relinquish control to your teams. And for leaders, that's so hard to do. There's that paradigm shift for them that once they experience it, it's really cool that if they really want more control, they've got to be willing to relinquish it.
Yeah, which is a weird one, I think, for many traditional type leaders. I think, as you said there, you know, the top-down approach is kind of gone. And if everybody actually wants the innovative companies that they think they want, then they've got to lead differently. They've got to be able to let grassroots come up with ideas and let them run with those ideas and let them innovate. Because otherwise, how is that going to happen? I mean, top down, all that keeps is grassroots doing exactly what they need to do, fitting into boxes. And you're not going to get innovation out of those people. So I think culturally, we have a lot of shift to happen across industries yet. Some companies are brilliant at this, it has to be said. And some of them I have seen that are, it's in their DNA almost. And I guess the other companies that are watching on are seeing some of that and wondering how they can get there as well. What advice would you have for them?
A key piece, Breda, is if you want your people to innovate, you're going to have to change the culture, because for them inherently, their number one need, especially when you get down to the front line, is going to be safety and security, the ability to feed themselves and their families. And if you're asking them to go make decisions, take chances, take risks, take the chance of failing, they have to know it's a learning experience and not a performance issue, something that might put that safety and security at risk. And that takes time. That's a key piece, is you've got to create that. And it's not easy. They aren't going to just automatically accept that until they actually see themselves or one of their coworkers fail and realize no performance issue. It was a learning experience. And our boss thinks it's cool that we tried something new. Words aren't going to do it. They're going to have to see it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would also say that I think if others are trying to innovate around them in the grassroots, but they're not getting acknowledged for that sort of stepping out of the comfort zone, going above and beyond, I think that's dangerous territory, because culturally then what people are seeing is, yeah, on this hand they say they want us to innovate, but on this hand we've seen X over there try it. They've burned themselves out trying to do something for this company, and they haven't been acknowledged, nor has it made a difference to them in their end of year review. And I have seen that. And I think that's a difficult one to crack, because it's typical strategy, corporate strategy, and then trying to put that into play is different. We all know how to write strategies. I mean, there's not too many in the corporate world that doesn't understand the importance of innovation. But I do think there's a lot of them that need to learn how to make that happen in practice, and how to expand it, and how to grow that kind of culture, because maybe it's a thing they haven't seen, before, or it's not a legacy leadership skill that they've seen as they were coming up the ranks. I'm not sure. What do you think?
It's not what happens, Rita. In fact, it's kind of funny. A few years ago, I was asked by a California government organization to speak on the topic of embracing change for their annual conference. And I had a feeling, just from observing as an outsider, that we may view that definition differently. I asked them, what does embracing change mean to you? And they said, we have all these new initiatives that our frontline need to embrace. And I said, good luck with that, because to me, when you try and shove change down on people, I don't know how you get people accepted. To me, the key is you have to give them a voice. That's the number one thing, is they have to have a voice. And if you think, well, I listen to my people, I give them a voice, if you get them to tell the truth, would they say the same thing? Breda, I got to share a story with you. This blew me away.
Please.
One client I was working with, what I will ask them to do is, especially if an initiative they're working on affects the front line, they need to get their input. On one of those initiatives, I asked them to conduct focus groups, and we talked about how you run them. One key thing, in the focus groups, when you're trying to get your people to talk, their boss is not in the room with them. After the focus groups, I brought all the volunteers back in, all these frontline employees, and I asked them what that experience was like for them. One person said, she said, really am grateful for this experience, because what I can tell you is no one has ever asked me my opinion, not just here, but anywhere else I've worked as well. And I asked the rest of the group, there were about 20 of them, how they felt, and they all said the same thing. First time for them, No one had ever asked their opinion, not just here, but anywhere else they have worked as well. So if you think you're really giving your people a voice, you may find out your people feel a bit differently.
Yeah. And that's exactly the problem. So I think we have strategies in corporates, and we think they're starting to embed, but like you do a focus group then, and you hear very differently. And I always, when I go into corporates to do talks, I would often meet the person in the lift, the receptionist, the person that's trying to set up my mic or whatever. And I'll always have the chats with them, and I'll always get a pulse on the culture in that organization, which is always very insightful for someone coming in cold, because unfortunately a lot of the senior execs often think it's A, when in fact the likes of you or me comes in and it's B. They're on different playing fields altogether, which is sad and difficult. You mentioned there about forcing change on people. And I mean, I've delivered change programs for 20 years almost. And I love change, but I know that's not usually what people love. And I think trying to help people understand the why behind the change is everything. And I've seen different organizations and industries trying to push change on staff and groups of people, and it's not necessarily always working, and it takes longer and it's more difficult than it should be, because the context setting hasn't been strong enough at the start. And I have learned that myself. I set up a lot of lean in circles to get people to mentor each other, and I've learned that if I spend a long time on the why and the context setting at the start, it nearly happens on its own. And I'm not sure the corporates actually put enough of that context setting in. Maybe they don't do enough on the focus groups, like you've mentioned, or maybe they haven't done enough of the why and how their why relates to the grassroots why. Because if you're asking me to do something to change, my why and your why, they need to be aligned.
They do. And you're hitting a key piece, Breda, which is you're starting with a common desired outcome, finding a place that both of you can agree to that this is where you want to get, because you may have completely different directions to get there. That common desired outcome is so critical. And I agree, the why up front and the why on the backside are both important. Ties back to giving that voice, and I've learned the hard way in my own businesses, because I've always kept them entrepreneurial, but I learned the hard way that I didn't always give a voice properly. Meaning this, that if your people give input, there are 3 stages, at least in my world. The first is when I'm working with someone, no one ever listens to me. Stage 2 is you're listening to me and now you're going to fix it for me. Stage 3 is you listen to me and you're going to give me the opportunity to fix it myself. And that's where I want to get things to. We came to an understanding with that same focus group, just to share how to give that voice, is because people have an expectation if they've spoken up, 100% of their ideas are getting instituted.
Yeah.
And I asked the group, okay, there are 20 of you in here. How many different opinions could there have been? And they acknowledged 20. So what's the likelihood 100% of what you suggested is going to happen? And they acknowledged, it's not going to happen. So we get that out of the way.
Yeah.
And I asked them, what do you think we really owe you? And there are the common themes that I personally believe. One comes back to the thing you said up front. We owe them feedback. What happened with their input? Number 2, to thank them profusely because they had the courage to share their ideas that may go counter to leadership. And the third is the opportunity to be actively involved. So at the end of all this, when we got the groups together, I asked them, okay, how do you want your feedback? In writing, verbally, both? How often do you want that feedback? And then lastly, the opportunity to participate, and shared with them, if you want to be on any of these initiative and innovation teams, you can. You just need to ask your manager, and they will make the time for you. Here's the funny thing, Breda, one last thing on this. The senior leaders were so concerned we were pulling 20 off the floor during an incredibly busy time that how can we possibly take that time away from them? And I said, I think you'll be fine. Next workshop, I asked them, of those people that were out, they were out for about an hour. How many of them asked for or needed overtime to complete their task that day? The answer was 0.
Yeah. And I think what you're touching on there is passion. I always find such passion across workplaces, and yet that passion is not being nurtured, and so it dies. It's like a little spark that's there. They know their products, they know their customers, they know the insides of those corporates and the mechanics, how they operate, and they're seeing different ideas. They're coming up with ways that things could be better. And there are little sparks everywhere across, the different teams and structures and levels. And if you are not actively looking for those sparks and actively encouraging those sparks, then those sparks go out. I said earlier to you, Michael, that I had 2 people around me at one point in corporates that were very good at spotting the sort of intrapreneur in me. And through the years, I reflected quite often on what did they do that was different to other leaders who didn't see that and didn't really capture it. And I would say the good leaders and the strong leaders that spotted the entrepreneurship were people who were open-minded. So if I came to them with an idea, or anybody else did, out of the likes of a focus group or a brainstorming session or hackathons or whatever, and an idea was born, they would always do everything they could to make it happen. Now, it didn't have to be, a very sort of sophisticated plan. It wasn't new products. It's usually small things. And I remember meeting one of those leaders at an event late last year when we were actually in conference centers. And I said to them, what did you do, or what do you think you did that made everything so successful? Because this guy was involved in a lot of diversity communities and networks. And he said, Breda, I just said yes to whatever idea they come up with. I said yes. And I was like, that was it? And he said, yeah, because the point he was making is so many of the senior execs go straight into, when they are given an idea, they'll go straight into I'll have to do the board will have to approve this. I'll have to do a business case. And I think, so sometimes it doesn't have to be that extreme at all. Sometimes you can create something wonderful with very little. And I've seen that happening. And I just think for leaders watching this tonight or listening to it, I would love them just to challenge themselves to say yes. When you ask for ideas and your people give you ideas, just say yes and let them run with it. And to your point, Michael, about the passion and the no need for the overtime, if you have passion in people, they will just do this automatically during the day, here and there. I had been doing that for years, so I just think that we've so much to learn as a society. I want our corporates to be brimming with innovation, and I want them to be brimming with people who are happy at work.
Breda, I agree. And it does get stifled so frequently. To me, in an entrepreneurial workplace, leaders have 4 roles, which is to provide guidance, mentorship, sponsorship, and support. And along with that, ties back to what your former boss said, is to give them any parameters. And those parameters need to be very wide. What can't they do? Just what are those outside things that if they go beyond this line, this could create a problem for our company, for our customers, whatever it may be. And as long as they know what those parameters are, and they should be extremely wide, then let them have at it. Let them go do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And even in companies that have a lot of protocols they have to follow, because whether they're, let's say, for example, one of my clients is a medical device company. If things go wrong, someone could die. In almost all cases, though, when it comes to innovation, there are very few things that they're doing on a daily basis that, when it comes to those innovations, are going to cause harm to anybody.
Yeah. like that, it is usually small little improvements that these people spot, you know, in the mechanics or maybe in product, or they are the answer to most of the problems I think corporates have. And yet we are not managing to get those solutions out and working often enough. Sometimes we are, and as I said earlier, some companies are good at this, and I've seen that. And you always notice the difference in the culture in those companies, because people are feeling vibrant about their work. They feel like they are making a difference because they're being allowed to. So yeah, diversity of thought, Michael, what's your view on diversity of thought, or what have you seen, I suppose, done well in that side of things, or when we have failed to capture and use the diversity around our tables?
In terms of doing things well, there was one former boss I had, and I liked his philosophy, which was I hire people smarter than me. Because if I help them be successful and they're smarter than me, then it's going to help me as well too, and it did. He was very successful with it. I think where we miss in most cases, and if we look at our personal lives, it's probably the case, is we like to be with people like us. Yeah. And because we want to be around people who may look like us, may think like us, that it's more comfortable. And when I'm building a team, for example, I already have me. I don't need another me. I need people who are different than me, that bring the different skills that I don't have. So for example, if I'm looking at someone, I'm not analytical. I need analytical people around me. I'm not all that. I'm somewhat organized. I better have some organized people around me. I want people who have those different thoughts. And I think if we can help remove a lot of the inherent blocks we have based on how somebody looks, based on their educational level. There are so many things we do in which we get in our own way. There was something that Terry and I talked about, the Leading Through Crisis in the Women in IT conference, which is when you are hiring, when you are bringing people in, can you remove a lot of those things? Like, for example, can you do blind interviews without knowing what was their educational level? What is their ethnic background? What is their job experience? To let them tell you the story, to find out more about them organically and who they are, than thinking we have to have people that fit in this box. Because I think that really holds us back. We have to understand what unconscious biases we have that get in the way of us hiring and bringing in a diverse organization in all areas. Because if we're going to grow and we only have one type of people, boy, that's going to be limiting for us.
Yeah.
What have you seen personally?
So I agree with everything that you've said there, and that's a lot of the recruitment side of things. So it's so important to get diversity of thought into your company. And to your point, the affinity bias is deadly. And what surprises me is that so many corporates are not sort of more strict on people doing unconscious bias training. They're not sending lots of them on courses. And it makes me wonder, do they actually realize the impact and the damage it's doing? And they may not. And I know that because I've had to treat mine. And, you know, I've been sort of dabbling in the diversity side of things for years now. I joined the Irish Defence Forces when I was 17, the reserves. And I was the only girl, five. There was 5 girls joined, but I ended up being my unit's first female lieutenant. And that is where I absolutely learned about unconscious bias, because I wasn't in a position of privilege. I was in the minority. And that's when I could see it from a very different angle. And to be fair, I hadn't seen it before that. Mm. So I suspect there's a lot of corporates and execs that have really no idea that they're in a position of privilege because they've never been in a minority. And I would have been one of those, only my life path took me into the military, and I spotted that then, because I was experiencing it. And for those in minorities, that's a big deal in your day-to-day. Whereas for a position a person in a position of privilege, they won't even notice they're doing it. So I think there's a lot to be gained there for corporates and industries to get unconscious biases treated. And usually, like, I do a wee bit of training on unconscious biases and diversity programs. And I'd always say to people, and in my coaching, if you haven't treated your unconscious biases, then they're most likely still there. Because I have yet to meet someone who has been born and reared and has become an adult that has not picked up unconscious biases. So therefore, if you start there, assume you need to do some training and some treatment on your unconscious biases. It will just change the angles you use to see life, to see work, to see everything. You'll see potential in people that you weren't able to see before. It opens up a whole new lens to you. So I just think that's there for the taking for industries and corporates.
I agree, and it's across the board. It's not just even ethnic groups, because this ties back to it too. The educational piece that I see here, living in California, so many companies, and I think it's as much as anything from an ego standpoint. We have to have people from these colleges with these degrees, and they end up with book smart people. I had one client who said we have this constant problem. We hire engineers, and it's a large Fortune 500 company. They stay for 2 years, and then they move on somewhere else. Yeah, you're a resume builder for them. Yeah. Why not instead, because they didn't have an environment that would inspire engineers to stay long term, that had that level of education, go hire people with AA degrees. Get people who had to pay their way to go to school, that weren't handed the funds from their families, that aren't just book smart, that actually have some street smarts, that actually want to be part of your company long term, that want to be part of the solution, that are grateful to be here and not just looking at you as a resume builder.
Yeah.
We set ourselves up. I have a neighbor that works for Fortune 500. And because of their unconscious hiring habits, when she was looking at interns, and I had brought this up with her before, she said, okay, we've got to investigate this. I only have intern applications from 2 cultures. Well, yeah, if you're only looking at higher education from specific schools, the people in particular that you said that don't grow up privileged, that may grow up in more challenging backgrounds and neighborhoods, they can't afford those schools. They aren't going to be able to pay for those degrees, but they could be far better employees, far better teammates, and far better entrepreneurs for your company.
Yeah. And you just reminded me of a team that I worked with a few years ago. And I would say on paper, they weren't the perfect tick box, but the grit and the hard work ethic those people had was amazing, absolutely astounding. And I think, you know, if you're looking at candidates, people who have been through a lot of change are wonderful because they've got those lessons that the others don't have. And I think there's no better teacher than change, because if you've been through a lot of it, you've had to learn so many hard lessons to overcome your change and to make it a successful outcome. And those are the kind of people that you should want in your company, because they will put their backbone into your company for you, whereas the others will almost see it a privilege that they've gone to work in your place. And as you said, it's probably a resume building practice for some. So it's about, I mean, unconscious bias would probably help. The treatment of unconscious biases would help at that recruitment level, because you should be able to see the difference in someone who has all of those life skills and industry skills versus someone who looks good on a CV. So there's already a few things, nuggets that we've come up with today, and they're not hard. And this frustrates me. These things are easy to fix, and yet so many corporates don't do it. So the blind interviews, the blind resumes, the having a lens or having an approach when you're interviewing people to look for people who can give you evidence of the grit in them and the hard work ethic and what change they've been through. They're easy things. And then unconscious bias training, you can make that fun as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be boring, online modules either. You can rock that up and you can do hackathons on it, or you could do all sorts of stuff. And again, I bet you there's lots of people in the grassroots that would come up with ideas like that if you ask them. To your point earlier, Michael, nobody had ever asked that girl.
No, they don't. And you're right. You can make unconscious bias training more fun as well, too. One of the things I'll do in workshops to help cultures integrate and get along is I'll ask each of them to share about their backgrounds, where they came from, little nuances, things that someone may never know might be a trigger for them because of how they grew up, and how people can connect with them better so they get to know each other. It also helps to get some elephants out of the room so you can be open on your conversations.
Yeah.
To me, once you start getting rid of a lot of the things that are inherently there, I think, in our companies, because a lot of times I think we can get too sensitive. Because we get so sensitive, we can't have open, candid conversations to where we can grow our relationships.
Yeah.
So I think things that have things fun, to get things on the table, get elephants out of the room, can be so beneficial to an organization.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose to wrap us up, leadership. So what's your take on leadership? And I'll give you mine to give you time to think of yours. But
appreciate that.
But for me, leadership should be seen as an honor. And the reason I say that is because I've had leaders in the past who absolutely changed my life. They made every day better. They helped me grow. They helped me stretch. They helped me, with career paths. They helped me strategically. And that is an honor in my view, because they have been a big part of my life. And when I look back on my career, the people that jump out at me straight away are those good leaders. So, so many people fall into leadership roles. They don't see it as an honor, nor do they see it as an opportunity to change someone's life or make someone's life better. And I know for a fact that you can do that as a leader. I've done that with teams that I've had down through the years, and I love it because I get such satisfaction out of it. My people are happy, they're vibrant, they're learning, they're growing, and they're passionate about their jobs. And that's what people have done for me too. So it just saddens me when I see leaders just managing work stacks and not looking after their people, or not trying to develop their people, or not even seeing it as part of the opportunity they have. What do you think?
I agree with you. Far too many leaders manage to the numbers. And that's the only thing that they have a direct correlation to look at. If my people produce this, then I hit my numbers, as opposed to the indirect side of, as a leader, if I focus on the 4 things I mentioned earlier, guidance, mentorship, sponsorship, and support, if I look at taking care of my people, helping them be successful, helping them create a better future for themselves, both professionally and personally, that those numbers take care of themselves. Yes. You don't have to have this direct correlation. Did we hit our metric this day to be a good leader? It's the other things that make a good leader. You touched on it earlier too. It's the little things. You may think I've got to do this magnanimous or huge thing for my people. A very small thing will go a long way. I'll tell you one quick funny story and I'll end it there, which is this is back in my corporate career with Pepsi. I just taken over running San Francisco and Oakland, California. I sat down with the team in Oakland and just asked the typical questions. What's going well? What would you like to see changed? And I was a young guy at the time. I think I was 30 years old when I took over that site. And most of the people working for me were much older than me. The guy said, listen, we were here long before you got here. We're going to be here long after you leave. Just don't screw it up while you're here. But he used a 4-letter word a little more crass than screw. I thought it was kind of funny. And I said, I appreciate that. I get it. and I'd still like to hear from you.
Yeah.
And he said, as a satellite facility to San Francisco, we get our paycheck one day later than they do. Do you think we could get our paycheck at the same time? I had a relationship with a guy in finance, and I asked him, I said, can that happen? He said, sure, I'll make the change. 6 months later, I'm sitting down with the same team. And that same person said to me, you were the first one to come in here and do what you said they were going to do. The only thing I had directly done for that person in 6 months was I got them their paycheck one day earlier. That you do a little thing as a leader, and it goes a long way with your people.
Yeah. Yeah. And every corporate and every leader listening to this has the opportunity to do that for their people, particularly now that we've now all got a hang of flexible working. So, I mean, I think that makes a big difference to people's lives and how they feel about where they work. If you're given options and choice in the way that you work, that means a lot to people. Like, I'm a mum of 3 kids. So flexibility in my job is very important, and I appreciate that. And I think more and more people after our lockdowns and our upskilling on tech will expect that and will see that as a deal breaker for them. And it's those little things that can make a difference. It's back to that leader that I mentioned earlier. Just say yes to people and let them work it out with them. Just say yes. Don't assume it's going to be a big problem or it's going to take, major change to implement something, because quite often it can be done nice and easy, very simply, and it can work really, really well. So, yeah. Well, hopefully, Michael, they've had a few nuggets out of us today, and hopefully some of what we talked about and covered will help someone, whether that's someone new to the leadership journey or someone who's an aspiring leader or someone who's been leading for years and has a very set way of leading, because good leaders need to be good at change on an ongoing basis. So if we're not transforming as people, then we're not transforming as leaders either.
Absolutely true, Breda.
Yeah. So look, it has been such a pleasure to do this with you, Michael. I am so glad and appreciative of your time. So glad that you joined me on this. I do love chatting to you. You've got a wealth of experience. And you were saying to me before we started that you're doing an awful lot of talks and workshops now. So tell us, just before we finish, what exactly you do in case that someone's watching and interested in getting in touch with you.
Thank you, Breda. When it comes to workshops, my primary focus is around helping companies create entrepreneurial workplaces. I have a workshop series, and what we do in the workshops is we work on those critical innovations. So typically companies see 6- and 7-figure returns financially just from things that occur, along with the really cool thing. They get to see their people shine. They get to find out who their star performers are. I also conduct both sales training and presentation skills training as well too, and I speak and do keynotes on all of those topics as well. So if someone is interested, I'd love to have them reach out.
Yeah, and where can they find you, Michael? Is it website or LinkedIn or?
Both are fine. Website is fairly easy. It's Michael, Michael, J, Levin, LE, as in Victor, IN.com. That's the easiest way to connect with me, and certainly on LinkedIn as well. I'm at Michael Levin.
Brilliant.
Breda, thank you so much for this. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to meet you at the Women in IT conference, and it's a pleasure being on your show today.
Yeah, likewise, Michael, and I'm sure we will keep in touch.
I hope so. Thank you, Breda.
COVID. I maybe get over
post-COVID.
Get over to the States to meet you yet.
Exactly. Hopefully face-to-face and not virtual next time.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Okay, so everybody that's listening or watching, please do share this if you've enjoyed this, because we want to try and get these messages as far-reaching as we can so that as many people can benefit as possible. Thank you for joining us today.